Okay, today's Q&A is about fruit trees, and the question is, I just bought a new house, and there's a couple of fruit trees in the backyard, and I want to know if there's any general halacha or particularly kashrus issues that I need to know about those trees. So I have a couple of things that come to mind, and I'll just give a quick overview of them. And the first is arla, and that is that fruits that grow on a tree are not permitted during the first 3 years of the tree's life. And for grapes, it's actually 4 years. So arla, so first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat those fruit. It's called arla. Not only can we eat them, but it's one of the foods that are also asar b'hana. I mean, you're not allowed to have any benefit for it. So, for example, you can't feed it to a pet. Now, so a lot of people don't realize that halacha applies even in chutz haaretz, meaning it's even though it's a mitzvah that has to do with land, so to speak, it applies even in chutz haaretz. So, but there's an unusual din that even though it's midoraisa that it applies even in chutz haaretz, it's only if you're very sure that that specific fruit is arla. So, if you know, like you plant a tree in your backyard, then you can't eat any fruit for the first 3 years. But otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be choshesh, of the possibility that it's arla if it came from chutz haaretz, and that's why people living in chutz haaretz don't think about this then very much, because they go to the fruit so they don't have to think about it. While in Eretz Yisrael, they very much have to think about it. Maybe this fruit is going to be from arla. Okay, now, in thinking about that, just bear in mind for arla purposes is that if you replant a tree, then depending on how you do the transplantation, the 3 years might restart. So you have this tree that's really 5 years old, but then you replant it, and it might, because of that, end up being starting the 3 year clock again. And the second thing is that the way we measure 3 years doesn't necessarily mean 36 months. It's not that when you plant it, you now start counting 36 months. It's a little complicated how you make that calculation, but roughly it's 3 years. But again, it very much depends on when you planted it as to how the 3 years counts. Okay, another thing that has to do with trees is klayim, which is that in Eretz Yisrael, there's a lot of limitations of which vegetables and grains you could plant next to each other. That's called klayim, to mix different things together. In the chutz haaretz, there's very few halachas of klayim that apply to us. And one of them is that you can't plant seeds of grapes together with 2 grains or 2 vegetables at the same time. Another is, which is maybe more practical for people, is that you can't graft from one min onto a different min, one min of tree to another min. Now, the word min usually is translated as species. So, but the way the scientific classification of species is not exactly how the din would look at it. So you definitely need to speak to a rabbi when you want to, if you have questions about that, of what am I allowed to graft onto another, which kind of trees could I graft onto the other ones. Very much, you have to talk to someone who can go through those details with you. Now, it often is also to keep or maintain a tree that was made through grafting, meaning the fruit of a grafted tree is permitted, but you may not allow it to be makayim to keep the tree, keep it going. And if you have that kind of a shaila, you should definitely speak to a rabbi to work out the details of that. Okay. Another din that has to do with trees, for trees is Kashrus, which is the Torah says we're not allowed to cut down a fruit-bearing tree. And basically, we that's extended to mean you can't do anything that's wasteful, something that's not useful. It's called Kashrus, to waste something to destroy something that would be useful. Now, the din is that if the tree doesn't have any more fruit to it, or if it's damaging your other trees, or it's damaging your property, or you need even the place where the tree is located, then the ikar din is you're allowed to uproot it because you're not doing it for no reason. You're doing it for a reason. At the same time, the Gemara speaks about a physical danger that comes from people who cut down fruit trees. Now, most poskim assume that those Gemaras about danger applies only when you were not allowed to cut down the tree. You cut down the tree for when you were not allowed to. Then there's this concern of danger. But at the same time, people are very concerned about these safety issues, the safety of what the Gemara says would happen to a person who cuts down a tree. So, because of that, a lot of people do is, even when you're technically allowed to cut down the tree, they will arrange that the actual labor, the actual physically cutting it down, should be done by someone who's not Jewish. And there's always another choice, which is you could take the tree and just transplant it, in which case the tree's not being destroyed, it's just being moved, and then that would not be an isser to Kashrus. And the very last thing is that there's a special bracha each spring when you see fruit trees are blossoming. There's a special bracha that's recited.